about something that they're passionate about, which is fermented foods. They eat amazing. Like they eat like all raw food. Lund eats all raw food. I know. Do you?
No.
Mostly?
Yeah.
Mostly. And then like they make their own fermented food. They make their own fermented radishes. Like they're amazing. And their food is super awesome. And they seriously like put their love into everything that they make. And so I'm really excited to have them here and sharing with you guys what they're passionate about, and hopefully get you guys passionate about fermented foods like I'm passionate about it. I love it. It's the best thing that ever happened to me. Well, besides meeting Michael, but food-wise, it was really awesome. So they have some really awesome information about benefits from fermented foods, how to make your own, and then they even have samples. So it's gonna be awesome. Are you ready, Mike?
Yeah.
Let's give Mike and Lynn a hand.
All right. How's that volume sound? Sound okay? If I start to like crazy feedback, someone please run up and help me. I would be super embarrassed. All right, so I want to welcome everyone. Thank you all for coming. It means a lot to us. And thank you, Nikki, for the wonderful introduction. We want to thank Nikki for having us out. So yeah, as Nikki said, my name is Mike, my wife Luna, and we are creating our company called Bliss, and we currently ferment a lot of veggies right now and some beverages. Okay, so like Nikki was saying, we have a massive passion for fermenting that has grown over the years, and so we're grateful to be able to come and share, the things we've learned, the information we've come across. We feel like these types of foods are essential to your overall health, and they've really changed my way of eating, our way of eating a lot. So yeah, we're constantly learning and growing and experimenting with new things, and like Nikki said, again, we have samples here that we're going to start passing out. We have some kombucha, and everyone knows what kombucha is? Yeah. Okay. No? Okay. So we have some kombucha. It's made with organic yerba mate tea and raw organic cane sugar. It's a simple kombucha recipe, this one that we brought to share. And then it's made with a SCOBY that we made ourselves. Do you know what a SCOBY is? So it's a symbiotic culture of yeast and bacteria. It basically looks like a slimy pancake. And that's what's going to ferment the sugars and make it a nice, refreshing sort of fizzy drink. And we also brought some blends of sauerkraut, some different blends that we'll pass out. And to pair with the sauerkraut, we have some organic tortilla chips, organic corn tortilla chips, and some homemade chia, hemp seed, flax crackers too, and some sliced raw cheese. So you can pick and choose if you want to eat some of that with the veggies. So I'm going to go through some of the benefits, but first, it's great to know that everyone's already heard of what fermented foods are and probiotics, because I was going over what I was going to say tonight with my brother and sister-in-law, and they're like, well, what if someone doesn't know what probiotics are? What if someone has no idea what, like, when you start saying some of these fermented foods, what they are? So if at any time I'm saying something and no one, like, you get lost, feel free, please interrupt me so I can stop for a second and clarify, so no one gets bored, falls asleep. So I'll list a couple of fermented foods. Can anyone name some fermented foods? Sauerkraut, yogurt, kimchi, kefir. Any other ones? What if I were to say miso? How about, what if I were to say pickles? Right? Now, a lot of these foods we can find today in like a major grocery store, but they're not really fermented, or they're fermented and pasteurized, or pickles, for instance, sitting on a shelf in vinegar and lack a lot of the health benefits that raw cultured vegetables have. And we call them cultured vegetables because there's live cultures of bacteria in them. You can also call them fermented vegetables. They're raw, though they haven't been cooked. So a few other ones, right? Sour cream, fermented, right? Cheese, Lots of people love cheese. How about chocolate? Does everyone know chocolate is fermented? And I'm not talking about like, you know, the cheap chocolate you can find in the gas station. Kefir or kefir, right? It's usually a milk-based type of ferment, although we also have made water kefir out of kefir grains and coconut water kefir out of coconut water. So there's different ways to make that. Soy sauce, fermented, right? Ketchup, fermented. Salsa, fermented. Kimchi was mentioned, right? Big in Korea. Nope. Does anyone here like Middle Eastern food?
I think it was your ring.
Thanks. Dosas, right? Middle Eastern food that was fermented. Fermented crepe. Okay. Some of the obvious too: cider, wine, beer. Right. So bread and wine, some of the oldest ferments around. And fermentation is a natural process, so it's existed longer than humans have been on the earth. And we can find humans have been fermenting food as long as our history here on earth. So this is nothing new. There's another one. Tabasco I had came across was a fermented food, although when trying to find out more about it, I didn't really dig too much stuff up. Okay, so I'm going to define what fermentation is. So the definition, and then I'll break it down a little bit. But fermentation is a metabolic process in which an organism is going to convert a carbohydrate into either an acid or an alcohol. Right? So like with wine, we have grapes, we have sugar, right? And yeast is going to convert that sugar, ferment that sugar into alcohol. Or with sauerkraut, for example, we have cabbage, and the natural bacteria in the cabbage is going to ferment the sugars in the cabbage and create what we call lactic acid. Okay, so a quick rundown of making sauerkraut is you have your raw cabbage, you cut it up, you shred it up, you're going to add some salt to it, it's in a bowl, let's say, you can massage it, you can pound it down, and naturally the water in the cabbage, the juice in the cabbage is going to get released, it's producing a brine. You're going to take that and put it into a fermenting vessel, like a mason jar would be simple. So you start to pack your cabbage that's all cut up with the salt, it's releasing its water, you pound it down, you smash it down so that the brine is going to come up above the cabbage. And then the fermentation process is going to begin. And this type of fermentation is called anaerobic. It's an anaerobic condition, which means it's not exposed to air, it's not just sitting down on the table. So it's underneath the brine. So that's very important when making sauerkraut. And then, like I said, the fermentation process begins there, and the bacteria are naturally going to ferment the sugars, and then you're going to end up with a tangy, sour treat that has lots of complex flavors. The flavors are enhanced a lot when you ferment stuff. Okay. And one really cool thing, I mean, like, we make relish too, and ferment garlic and onions, and like we were kind of weary at first of trying garlic and onions because the garlic breath and the onion breath, but through fermenting it doesn't happen. I mean, you taste the garlic, you get all the benefits of garlic and more, and then you're not burping it up in the middle of the night. That's really cool. So yeah, I think we're gonna hand out some kombucha right now. Yeah. Are there any questions so far about what I'm talking about? Yes.
You're not adding any water to the cabbage. It's just the
Yeah.
cabbage that's
No.
out. The water
When-
that's out.
First we make the tea. So we make the yerba mate tea. So it's just
No,
like
I'm
making...
asking about the sauerkraut.
Oh, the sauerkraut. Typically no, but sometimes if we're using vegetables and there's not enough brine, like we have a blend here that was made with kale, for instance, and there wasn't as much brine. So yeah, we would top the jar off with some water. And sometimes we have to add a lot of water. We'll add some more salt, or like with radishes, yeah, we'll add water to it, and we add spring water to our veggies. So Luna's going to be passing out some kombucha for everyone to try. If you don't want to try it, that's okay too. And so I'll just talk about a couple of the benefits to fermented foods. Like I said, feel free to just interrupt me if you'd like. Number one is they improve digestion. So, like I was saying, the whole fermentation process is going on, and bacteria is eating up the sugars, converting the sugars into lactic acid. This is a job that your own saliva and digestive enzymes are going to do anyway. So these fermented foods are already pre-digested, okay? And they're going to provide additional enzymes as well, so they'll help you digest the food that you're eating, the fermented food, and other foods that you eat them with. Okay, so like, is anyone wondering like, what would I eat sauerkraut with, or what do you eat these fermented foods with? Yeah. Anything, yeah. You could eat it with anything. I mean, once you start to get used to the taste, use your imagination and like, it would sound good with this, it would sound good with that. If you look into history, right, look into every culture had some type of food that they cultured, or many different types of food. So for instance, like the Russians, the Germans, the French, you know, they ate them with a lot of sausages, pork, potatoes and dumplings. You know, in the U.S. and all over, chicken with beef, with fish, with eggs, on sandwiches. Of course, like, you know, people would get hot dogs and big sausages, they put sauerkraut or relish on them. It's something like we intuitively, I think, we would just do. And unfortunately, like a lot of the food that is out there now are like cheap imitations of this. So the health benefits aren't there. But we think like, okay, I want something sour with this meat. They go great on salads, they go great on, you know, vegan or vegetarian foods. So maybe not great with ice cream, but you know, one of our friends, she sometimes eats a bunch of junk, and then she'll end up being like, I'm gonna eat some sauerkraut now because, you know, my digestion's gonna be off. Or my brother's, you know, he goes out to eat sometimes. He eats really healthy, but sometimes he's out at a party or a restaurant, he eats some junk, so he'll take his own sauerkraut along and just eat that too. Helps him digest the food. Plus, if there's, you know, things in the food you don't want, pesticides, mercury, all that kind of stuff, like Michael Paul was saying, you know, even organic foods got some stuff in it that we don't really want. So fermented foods help detoxify that kind of stuff out of us, and I'll talk about that in a second too. A word of caution if you've never really, sorry.
There's always fermented pickles in the place. Every place that Catherine does, always like that. For the digestion, or the, where you just said right now.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, a word of caution is the fermented veggies, living fermented veggies are cleansers, and if you're not used to eating them, then you know, you might experience some gas, bloating, some discomfort. My sister-in-law, she made veggies to take back home with her and taught her mom and her boyfriend how to make them. And she's like, just go slow, you know, which they did at first, and then they kind of like overloaded on them and they were running for the bathroom. So you just have to kind of take it slow and listen to your body and everything. Realize if that's happening, it's not because like you got sick and there's a bad batch of veggies, it's just because, you know, they're house cleaners and they're doing their job, they're cleaning out, and you just gotta, you know, scale down. How many people here are on a raw food diet, or we're on a raw food diet? All right, yeah. Fermented foods, like the ones that we have, are raw and more than raw. Okay, and so what I mean by that is like they're already pre-digested. They have the additional enzymes and all that good stuff. They're loaded with good bacteria, right? Sometimes fermented foods, sometimes raw foods, raw vegetables are kind of hard for us to digest. I know, like if I ate raw cabbage, you know, it doesn't digest very well with me. And sometimes raw foods can be really rich in sugar, like, you know, raw fruits can be really rich in sugar, and depending on your condition, maybe you really want to steer away from sugar, you know. So fermenting helps take those sugars away, convert them to something else. And like I was saying, there's additional enzymes. Fermented foods actually produce vitamins in your gut. And I'll talk a little more about that in a second too. And they increase the availability of the minerals in the food. So you're getting more out of that food. Anytime you ferment something, the nutritional value of what you're fermenting like skyrockets. So it's great. It's great to know that you can get more out of that food. And they have wonderful antioxidant properties. Second big thing I wanted to touch on is your inner ecosystem. Fermented foods help with your inner ecosystem, with What the hell is an inner ecosystem? Is anyone wondering that? Yeah? Inner ecosystem. Would anyone like to be a volunteer and like be a model? Oh, Nikki, I saw your hand first. Okay, great. So, thank you. Our inner ecosystem, we can think of it as the tube that runs from the mouth to the anus. One long tube, right? See? One long tube. We call it our GI tract, our digestive system, right? But it's one long tube. It's not like one part plugs into another part, plugs into another part. So, she's got her inner ecosystem, okay? There's different bacteria that live in her mouth compared to the different bacteria that live in her large intestine, compared to different bacteria that live in her small intestine. And there's a unique community going on of bacteria inside, okay? And we want to make sure that we have a good balance of the good bacteria to keep the bad guys in place, because we're going to have the bad bacteria. You know, we want to have the good bacteria in there to keep us strong and to keep the bad guys in place. So let's say Nikki is at work and someone comes into the office and they got the cold or they got the flu, right? So in my opinion, like once that person comes in, everyone's got the flu. Okay, everyone's got the flu. But the reason why some people, right, succumb to the symptoms of the cold or the flu is just because their immune system's not strong enough to battle it, to take care of it. So Nikki's super healthy, she doesn't get the flu. Her friend gets the flu, let's say, right? And let's just say a friend runs to a doctor and gets antibiotics, okay? And what do the antibiotics do? Yeah, right. Kill some of the bad, all of the good bacteria, right? So now our good bacteria is gone. So what happened to our inner ecosystem right there? Yeah, exactly. So Nikki tries to help her friend, and she's like, hey, you know, you can eat some like fermented foods and get some probiotics in your system and everything. And she's like, great. I don't recommend like taking antibiotics and then thinking that you're just going to take some probiotics and everything's going to be all right. That's a kind of, I think that's delicate. Like, I wouldn't do that kind of thing. But so anyway, her friend gets antibiotics, and it doesn't have to just be from pills. She could have been eating crappy food. You know, animals are injected with antibiotics, right? So it could be everywhere. So anyway, her friend has antibiotics. Now she has an imbalance in her inner ecosystem, and this is just cyclical, right? Because then she's going to get sick again, more antibiotics, and like we're lacking the tools here that we need. We're lacking the good bacteria, right? So what happens when our inner ecosystem's out of balance? Number one, impaired immune system, right? And how many different things can go wrong when we have an impaired immune system? Like tons of things, right? We can sit here and just keep naming disorders, diseases, all types of stuff, aches and pains and overgrowth of yeast and all kinds of stuff.
Constipation.
Yeah, well, that was the next thing, gut health. Gas and bloating, right? That can go off. How about unexplained weight gain? Right? And I'll touch on this in a second too. That was a big one. Brain fog, mood disorders, anxiety, that kind of stuff. I used to have crazy anxiety attacks. Like to the point where I remember I was younger and I told my dad, like, we gotta take me to the hospital, I'm dying right now. And so, yeah, that was panicking moments. And skin problems, rashes, acne, bumps, all sorts of stuff like that. So we want to keep our inner ecosystem balanced and healthy. We want to feed it good bacteria. Fermented foods is a great way to do that. And let's thank Nikki for being a model and being up here and being entertaining. Thank you. Next big benefit is fermented foods are great for pregnant and nursing women, babies, and children. So me and Luna, soon we hope, are going to have a baby. I mean, nothing's happened yet, you know, but so this is a big thing that I've been looking into, that we've been looking into, getting ready to have a baby and everything, and when you do have a baby, and, you know, looking into midwives and doulas and all that kind of stuff, to ensure that the mom, pregnant lady, has good bacteria in her system, because she's going to pass that on to the baby, eating fermented foods again, right? Having the good bacteria, the probiotics, because you're passing that on to your kids. Fermented foods help alleviate morning sickness in the early stages of pregnancy. I mean, do you get morning sickness in the late stages of pregnancy though? Right? I don't think so. So that was kind of a fun way to but alleviate morning sickness. So, like I was saying, when you make sauerkraut, you make a brine, you can sip that liquid, okay? And you can give that to your baby before they can chew. You can give that to your children. The liquid's really good to help their digestive system. Friendly bacteria are so vital. Did you have a question?
I think that the store-bought, like Synergy, kombucha is kind of weak.
Is healthy?
The average is good or is it
I think so. I think that they're usually sweeter. They show that they have a lot of good strains of bacteria in them. So, I mean, heard of it.
not?
So real quick about C-sections. These friendly bacteria are so vital that this is how nature intended us to enter the world. As the baby exits the womb, slides through the birth canal, is coated in mom's good bacteria. If she's got it, maybe she's been on antibiotics though. And as you're introduced to the world, you're coated in this good bacteria. And then, naturally a baby would have the colostrum, the breast milk, which would coat the inside with good bacteria. But there's a lot of things about, having a baby C-section where you miss that whole thing. And undoubtedly C-sections have saved many, many lives and everything, so I'm not saying anything bad. But just as a word of caution, like, you can Google this stuff and find out about C-sections, good bacteria, and the problems that your child could face, or maybe you could face it, or you are facing because this happened to you. And the things you could do about it, introducing the good bacteria into your system. Our weight, okay? Fermented foods play a big part in our weight because our GI tract plays a deciding role in whether or not we're slim or not so slim. Beneficial bacteria help keep us slim, and simply because certain bacteria harvest more energy out of food than others. It's not always the calories that matter, but it's the variety and types of bacteria that's living in your gut. Okay, so eating fermented foods, these bacteria are quick learners. They exchange genetic information, and eating them increases the diversity of them, which is what you want to keep your body, at a good, healthy weight. And fermented foods help control cravings. That's been a big one for me. People sometimes crave too much of the wrong food, like really refined white flour products, so like junky, cookies and pastries and breads and colas and candies and sweets. And I'm not saying anything bad about like pastas and breads, but some people have 3 dozen cookies. They know they shouldn't eat them, and they just crave them. Like I just want to keep eating these sweets or these sugary foods. Fermented foods do so much for cravings. Okay, and sometimes they take a little getting used to, but your appetite will change, and cravings will go away. And that's a big one. And the last big thing I wanted to touch on is increasing longevity and strengthening the immune system. We've talked about the immune system a little bit. 80% of the immune system resides in the gut. So digestion and absorption of nutrients is key, because we need to get at the food that we're eating, the nutrients that are in there, those are the tools to keep us healthy. So we can do that by having the good bacteria there. Bacteria are our immune system. We want to keep our enzyme reserves strong, because like I was saying, eating these types of foods will help. Let's say you eat fish, there's mercury in the fish, right? But eating these types of foods will help detoxify and eliminate those toxins. Good bacteria helps make vitamins in the gut. B vitamins, for instance, like folic acid, niacin, thiamine, biotin. Vitamin K2, does anyone know what vitamin K2 is good for? Bone health, cardiovascular health. So these things are actually made in the gut by eating these foods. And if you go out and you buy probiotics at the health food store, that's a good step, but fermented foods are way more potent than probiotics. And there's a lot to do with that, depending on how the probiotics were made, but fermented foods, more potent than probiotics. So if you're thinking of, should I take probiotics, should I eat fermented foods? Fermented foods are way better. So yeah, that's pretty much it. If there's any questions, I'd love to either answer them or tell you I have no idea. And again, we want to thank everyone and thank Nikki for allowing us to come. And we have our other sample of foods that we're going to pass out right now. And questions? Yes.
How do you know when you're making something that's fermented? How do you know when it goes bad?
How do you know when it goes bad? Sometimes, like the veggies on, let's say they're in a mason jar, and they got on the top of the mason jar, and not underneath the brine, you'll notice they kind of molded. You can just scrape them off. Everything underneath the brine is fine. You'll see though, it'll look funny, it might smell funny, but typically as long as they're under brine, you know, you'll be able to smell it, you'll be able to see it, but the veggies underneath the liquid will be fine. They're not in. This was the way we preserved food in the past too. So keep that in mind that like the harmful bacteria can't live in that acidic environment underneath that brine. So this is how we preserve food. Important thing to know. I saw some other hands. Rachel.
So not all fermented, like beer doesn't have anything beneficial.
That's a good question. I like to think so because I drink beer.
Yeah. We just pretend it does.
Right? Yeah.
Okay.
We'll pretend it does. I mean, there's less sugar in it, and the alcohol makes you feel good, so that's a good thing.
I didn't hear the question. Can you repeat it?
She was saying, you know, beer's fermented, so is there like health properties in beer? And it's like, well, you know, it makes you feel good, and the sugars are fermented, so you'll be a happy person unless you drink too much.
When you do the garlic,
Yeah.
do you squish that down, or do you let it?
A couple of times, you can ferment it whole, or we dice it up and mix it in with other veggies. So, yeah, you can do it however. Nikki?
Have you ever played around with yogurt? Like making your own yogurt?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Out of we use raw milk and then just use like a yogurt that's already made that has live cultures in it as a starter, and then those bacteria will help ferment the sugars in the milk. And you got to use like a whole milk, high fat milk. You can't use like thin milk to make yogurt. But yeah, you have to kind of heat it up too to get the whole fermentation going, and yeah, you can make yogurt.
I had one more question.
Yeah.
So basically, if it's like say you're fermenting it in a closed tight lid and it's all underneath the brine, like you said, can that like last forever? Potentially.
I say they last indefinitely. Yeah. I mean, we've had fermented veggies that have been going on for months. Typically we do ours for like 2 weeks. Some people do it for a couple of days. Some people for a week. But yeah, I think the flavor just enhances the more and more you keep fermenting them. And then once you open them up, you slow the fermentation process down by putting them in the refrigerator. But I've had whole jars that I think they never go bad.
Does it get better?
I think they get better. Yeah. Yes.
What happens to the acidity level?
Mm-hmm.
The acidity level changes as weeks or months go on.
Mm-hmm.
If you're keeping a certain batch like outside, like not refrigerated,
Uh-huh.
just briefly talk about that.
It's going to get to a point where it's not really going to change much anymore. So kind of like with alcohol, if you're making wine, for instance, it's going to get up to a certain point when the sugars are fermented, and then like the yeast aren't going to be able, they die off because they can't live in that environment. So they actually, they die because now they're in a high alcohol type of environment where they can't survive. So it will get to a certain point, and and then you could add more sugar and fermentation keep going, but it'll only get to sort of a certain point, depending on what it is. Yeah.
Is cabbage the only vegetable that can ferment without having to add sugar? Or can you do that with any vegetable?
Pretty much any vegetable will ferment. We've just done radishes before. We've made, like I said, relish, like basically just onion. Yeah, pretty much any vegetable. But typically, like sauerkraut is like cabbage. So.
Right. So just the same thing, water and salt in a jar.
Yeah, right. Or like you're making pickles, you get the right kind of cucumbers that are going to work, and you make the brines with salt, water.
Right. And how long does it take before they're fermented?
Some people go a couple of days, and it depends on what you're doing. Like we've done just beets before. Usually the sauerkraut that we make will go for 2 weeks. Some people do it for a couple of days. Sometimes, we're like running low on our own, so we'll eat it after a week.
Do you put it someplace warm to help that, or not really?
Well, we're living around here, and so most of the time, it's never getting that cold.
Right.
Typically, I forget the exact temperature. You want to keep it like around 72 degrees, like a normal room temperature. So yeah, you don't want it to be too cold, of course. But if you're in this area, you don't have to worry about that. Yeah.
I've heard of like adding apples and stuff like that to your sauerkraut.
Yeah.
Does it come out tasting like apples? Come out tasting sour? How does that?
No, we've added apples to a lot of ours, and yeah, it's nothing like eating a raw apple. So, sour, tangy kind of taste, and they're definitely not as crunchy.
Awesome. Do we have any last minute or any other last questions that they want to ask about how they can maybe start their own fermented?
I was curious about the alcohol. You said like at a certain point the alcohol is going to kill the bacteria or the yeast.
Yeah.
Is there any way to make the alcohol content higher by adding less sugar or more yeast or something?
Typically, you'll add more sugar to get a higher alcohol content, like when making beer. But then, like if you're familiar with like making spirits, you'd have to distill the alcohol out.
Okay.
So yeah, that's a whole kind of different thing. But if you're looking to raise the alcohol, like in beer, you're adding more sugar.
To distill it, you just turn it to vapor and run it down the
Right.
Yeah. And then you can increase the alcohol level.
Yeah, you're basically just pulling the alcohol
Pulling it
off.
out. Okay.
Right, and
Yeah.
just like concentrating the alcohol.
So the more times you distill it, the higher it will go?
I believe so, but I've never done that.
No, natural alcohol is like 12%. That's a high.
Right, yeah. Yes?
You seal the mason jar when you make it in a jar?
Yeah, we seal ours. I know some people that just kind of like put a loose lid on or just like a cheesecloth on there with a rubber band. We seal ours. You can find like those perfect picklers, I think they're called. It's like an airlock system you would use like when making beer and stuff. And that way you can seal your lid on. You fill the airlock with a little bit of water, and the carbon dioxide will get out, but no oxygen will get into your fermenting vessel.
It doesn't explode.
That's a good question. We've actually had a couple of jars.
Break the glasses.
Well, we've had a couple of jars break, and all of a sudden we noticed that they went bad, and I don't know, they could have broke, who knows how, but they broke and the liquid came out, and then the veggies were all dry and no good. So, and then yes, definitely if you pack the jar too tight, they're going to overflow. So a lot of people keep them in a bowl on a tray because that fermentation is like, it's fizzing, especially at first it's bubbling, and then like, you have your lid on and it's coming out the sides. So, yeah.
I've had the fermented salsa and I took the lid off and it just expanded out.
Yeah.
Make more.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Great. Thank you guys very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you guys so much for sharing and for offering samples for us to try. I think that was a really good example of like how tasty something that's like old can taste. And then hearing about how beneficial it is, it's pretty awesome. And it's like a magical food that you never knew about that you probably ate with your bratwurst or whatever. So it's nice to know, kind of connected to on why you would eat that with the hot dog or with the sauerkraut. So I would really love to encourage you guys to try to play around at your own house. I've tried to make my own sauerkraut before, and it's pretty easy. And I could even show you how to do it. I'm sure they would even be better at showing you, but I wanted to share their information. They actually sell,